moving on to our third element here. Can you try to convert me, Andy? Do your best to the merits of brutal architecture, because well, more to the point, actually, let's start this off. Can you explain to me why it is that footballers are possibly at odds with conservation in Manchester?
Right, this is it's a very interesting story, actually. It also has it's amusing points, shall we say. But anybody that knows the Northwest and knows the Greater Manchester in particular will know that there's been a huge amount of development there in the last 10-15 years, and it's ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen the development of things like Salford Quay and Media City, and there's a very conscious attempt to develop the Greater Manchester area and Manchester as a commercial and media powerhouse.
And also the Imperial War Museum as well.
Imperial War Museum North, absolutely. All of those things that the BBC transferring some of its departments to Media City and so on, to go with Granada, who were already there, and so Manchester is very much seeing itself as part of the new thrusting economy of UK PLC. And add to that, you have two of the biggest football clubs in Europe, if not the world, in Manchester City, and the other lot who play in red and white, who who must not be named.
The ones who are probably more famous, though.
They are probably more famous. They're meant to be. Yes, for some reason, they're supposed to be the most famous and wealthiest football club in the world. It's the old joke about the M6 southbound is jammed because all the Manchester United fans are going home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But anyway, enough of that. As a Charlton fan, am I bitter? Yes.
This is why I like rugby.
What all this is boiling down to is that there's another city centre development scheme which is being, although there's Chinese money involved, in the development consortium that's putting it forward. Two of the front people for this are two former Manchester United footballers, Phil Neville and Ryan Giggs. Mm-hmm. So they are involved in a multi-million development in central Manchester, in the area close to Manchester City Hall, which is Grade 1 listed, and part of the conservation area. And it is dividing the city by all accounts. It's also dividing certainly the developers from the conservation bodies. Last week, Historic England and 3 other leading conservation bodies put out statements to the effect that they were going to oppose the development because they found it intrusive, overpowering, damaging to the conservation area. The consensus is that the development plan as currently is, which involves 2 tower blocks which are coloured bronze, and which, according to The Guardian at least, some local Mancunians have christened the 2 turds, are going to be overpowering and so damaging of the city's heritage and of the conservation area around Manchester City Hall that the development should be blocked.
Right.
At planning.
So much unfortunate stuff going on there. Polished, turds, blocked.
I'm not responsible for the imagery that immediately comes into my head.
Sorry.
Please don't do a Freudian analysis of any of that. But no, in all seriousness, and in fact, it's already been suggested that the Community Secretary should call the whole project in for adjudication in London, because it's just it's too important to be left to the vagaries of the local planners. I suspect it will. I think this is a story that's going to run. It is very interesting, I think, that Historic England, as the government statutory advisor, have come out so strongly against, because they've normally tried to accommodate and adapt rather than condemn absolutely. And in this case, their northeast director of planning came out absolutely saying it was a damaging proposal which they were going to oppose.
We'll
I mean, to give you an idea of the other things that are at stake here, one of the buildings that is going to be demolished is a pub, which is the last remaining building that survives in the area that was present on the day of the Peterloo massacre in 1819, which took place at St Peter's Field on the edge of Manchester, when a number of local people were killed by the militia when they were engaged in a political protest, and were ridden down by sabre-wielding soldiers.
Right.
So it's an iconic moment in British political history, in British working class and trades union history. And the last remaining building that was present on that day is going to go as part of this development if it goes forward. So that's the kind of emotive issues that the heritage bodies are talking about, as well as the technical issues of business development. Is it good quality development? Is it overbearing?
But given that won't be resolved during the course of this podcast, I would like to, I suppose, tag on a related issue, and that is one that's ongoing. It has to do with my old university, Durham University, and its ridiculously hideous, foul, concrete monstrosity, brutalist architecture student union building, which I have living experience of and is not a nice place to be. But nonetheless, at the moment there's a tremendous debate going on about whether or not it should be saved from potentially being replaced. And I
hang on, so can I just interrupt you there, Mark? You were saying that hideous brutalist student union building. You mean the iconic cascade of concrete down the side of the cliff towards the river that's called Dunelm House, which is an icon of mid-20th century architecture and an absolutely fabulous piece of... it's that wonderful moment when architecture combines with sculpture to create a piece of art.
Right, yeah. I think lots of things cascade and can be moulded, but...
But when you see it in juxtaposition with the bridge as well, where you have this wonderful, again, this thin leap of a bridge across the gorge, and with Dunelm House cascading down the cliff behind it in concrete. So it's a spectacle. You've got to admit it's a spectacle.
It's
and it's a spectacle that the city would I think be the poorer for if it was.
Durham, it's in the shadow of what is routinely voted the greatest piece of medieval architecture in Britain, if not Europe, and this thing, which, granted, the bridge is kind of cool. The bridge has a height and an elegance to it, but the building is just horrible. The steps are too big to really step up and down, and maybe I've just got short legs. I don't think so though. The rooms are cold. The atmosphere isn't very good. And I suppose here really what we're coming down on is this idea of form and function in terms of building design. And this relates to Manchester. It also relates to, for example, the student union building in Durham. I'll put links to relevant stories below it. Obviously your story and also this one. And in thinking about this, I mean, yes, we could. I'm sure we could argue all day about how to refer to that building. But actually, something else occurred to me the other day, and maybe this is a point where we can, and that is that actually there's for example, Conwy. Conwy is a medieval town in North Wales, not too far from where I'm from. It's a very iconic place. It's probably my favourite castle. But the town, apparently, supposedly, over the years, the experience of living in the town, and in a town that has incredibly consistent town walls, they haven't been robbed out or destroyed, for example, as they have been for the most part in Newcastle by the railways and this kind of thing, has apparently, this experience has led to people feeling hemmed in by what is ostensibly beautiful and historic architecture. Now, surely this is an argument for quality of life. I mean, so much as if the experience of living, whether it's the Brutalist building or these buildings in Manchester, and their impact on life is negative, then is that not an argument for getting rid of them? But then again, I suppose in the case of Conway, they didn't. They kept it.
probably by accident, looking at what happened to a lot of other Victorian town developments. If you look at Northampton, the first thing that went when the railway went to Northampton was the town castle. Canterbury, the medieval town ditch was taken away and backfilled in the 1960s to build an inner bypass, dual carriageway bypass, city centre. So
it almost happened in York as well, actually. But supposedly there was a fairly forward-thinking campaign group, essentially, who said no, we should keep these walls. They're going to be important for our chocolate box future, and they weren't wrong. There are other reasons there though as well. I think York deliberately put a heavy tax on new industry, for example. Yeah, so places like Leeds and Sheffield went down the industrial route, whereas York kept its charm. But so that's I suppose that's another form of engineering, isn't it? I suppose civil engineering. Civic
it
engineering.
is. I think the reason I think that perhaps when it comes to these planning issues, we should give places like Dunelm House the benefit of the doubt. At the very least, we are going to disagree. I think it's a great-looking building, and deserves to be, as does the 20th Century Society and many other people. But what I would say is, I think that the vagaries of taste at any particular moment in time are too fragile a foundation to build what we hand on to the future on. I think we need to. I think we need to retain an objectivity. I'll give you an example. I betcha that back in the 1090s or whatever, there was some little churl looking up at the crag on where the cathedral was rising, and was saying, "I didn't vote in the Witan for these bloody foreign architects to come over and imposing their taste and their monstrous buildings on my town."
Yeah.
See what I mean?
Yeah. Stupid Lindisfarne community burying their saints wherever they want. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want my country back.
I want my crag back.
It all went to hell in a handbasket when they stopped building round huts and made them rectangular.
Indeed, corners. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
You know what I mean.
Yeah.
Look, what I'm saying is, I think there are some buildings. I think Dunelm House is one of them. I think there've been others. Certainly in London, there've been cases where buildings that you can make a very good case for on architectural grounds that will be seen as influential, will be seen as important, and in some ways as spectacular and I hesitate to use the word, but as castle-like or as cathedral-like as something like Durham World Heritage Site, Canterbury World Heritage Site, whatever, Tower of London World Heritage Site. And I think we should be very, very careful before we sweep those away forever.
Yes, I can buy into that. In so much it does represent a legitimate form, which is unique. but no. Yeah, I know what you mean. But this isn't just a taste thing. This is an experiential thing, and I can't help but wonder whether some of these issues. I mean, this is the reason why they're such hot potatoes, is because people often accuse people of NIMBYism, not in my backyard, when actually it can be a bit more intense than that. I mean, for example, here in the northeast, I live about 3 miles away from something called the Biker Wall, which is essentially a village in upwards. It's not a high rise, but it's a series of high rises made into a wall. Basically, it's seen by architects as being amazing architecture. It's often remarked on by people on the metros that go past as looking like a Lego model, a child's Lego model at that. But the problem is that the people living in that building feel trapped, in so much as it's listed, so they can't make any modifications, and it's also not designed for modern life anymore. It's not, and in that sense, it's one of those weird things where I find myself counterintuitively on the side of not saving everything just because there is an example of it. If that's what I mean. And in the case of Biker, it actively shapes how people feel about where they live. I mean, I suppose all architecture does. but it shapes it for the negative. They feel contained and trapped. Well, and the same goes for the Durham Student Union.
Yeah, I think we also have to look behind the reasons for, Durham is wanting to demolish Dunelm House and redevelop for commercial reasons. It's expanding the university. It wants
it's got a very greedy eye at the moment. Any green patches of, we can put something there.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we've seen that in Oxford. We've seen the heritage views of Oxford damaged by the Port Meadow development and so on. That's just going back to consultation for remedial works. Although the campaigners there say it'll never be the same again because the buildings being so high and so blocky. But they're looking at effectively camouflaging 5-story student accommodation blocks because they screwed up the planning consents.
Okay.
So I think we have to look at the motivations behind these, and often the motivation behind seeking to demolish something, it can be dressed up as it's no longer fit. The building's no longer fit for purpose. Actually, it's inconvenient. The Tower of London would be inconvenient if it wasn't.
I'm sure it's been inconvenient for lots of people. Yeah.
It's a huge. There's a huge piece of real estate there on the corner of the city, which is worth an absolute fortime.
Yeah, it's just a shame that there's
development.
Exactly.
If there's somebody from the Gulf or somebody from the Far East could, I'm joking, but mind you wouldn't put it past some of our politicians. Anyway, in all
Britain is open for business.
In all seriousness, I think very often a lot of these problems to do with lifestyle and to do with fit for purpose for modern life and so on can be resolved, at least in part, by a bit of thought, a bit of consultation, a bit of sharing of ideas and opinions, and above all, actually, by a decent budget. And the problem we've got at the moment is nobody's prepared to spend on the kind of quality. On the kind of quality that you need. We're losing perfectly usable buildings, not necessarily listable buildings, but perfectly usable buildings that are 40, 50, 100 years old, because there are tax advantages for developers in demolishing and doing new build. Not because the buildings aren't usable or convertible. In fact, sometimes often convertible for less money than it will cost to do new build, but they get tax advantages for new build and QED. So it's a lot more complex than issues of taste and fashion, and I think often taste and fashion are used as a convenient excuse to cover something that's a lot more venal.
Yeah, well, yes, they're often used as the lightning rod. Yeah, so my visceral reaction to a particular building sometimes isn't the issue, but I suppose the issue at hand is having an open dialogue and also one which is willing to examine the motivations of everyone involved. Okay.